All right, today is December 20th, and we're continuing our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. And today's topic is about we did tips and techniques for personal development. Last week, you actually went over, there were four, what was it, like the monk, the warrior, the ascetic, and the householder. And then you mentioned uh, is it like now in this we're living in civilization, the householder is the most practical approach. Could you go over that? And yeah.
Yeah, it was that was what you wanted to know about, right, Mike? When you
Yeah.
asked the question, is so basically just how to really reach enlightenment while you're just in the middle of
Right.
life and stuff. And so, yeah, so the whole point. Let's just level set on the whole point of all of this, and say it's liberation. So it's enlightenment. Just think of it as liberation, and it's not easy these days. It was a lot easier in the past. Our society is a lot less forgiving, and it demands that you're productive. So what most guidance and spiritual disciplines and stuff, that anything to do with personal development, now has the tone of helping you cope with the stresses of industrial civilization. And so you can never really make progress. It's a bit like, yeah, the gurus and that, they don't really want you to make progress because they're like a drug company. A drug company doesn't ever want you to be healthy. They want you to be reliant on their drug. So like Lipitor is their best drug because everybody stays on it for life. And, you know, they don't, that's like a drug company. They don't want you to get a drug that'll heal you and you don't need any more drugs. And so it's a bit like that with self-help gurus. And so it becomes a lesson in techniques that are kind of coping mechanisms that are kind of like putting band-aids on all the stress that's you know, a very unnatural and suicidal and ecocidal system is you know is sending us to. So the way I characterize it, let's not pull punches here, is basically we're all insane. We're all batshit crazy insane. There are no redeeming features from this civilization. It's a marvelous experiment. It's a bit like crack, but it's terminal. So in terms of, we've developed a culture that is a snuff cult. So we are deeply embedded in a cult, and civilization is a culture. And if you've watched my videos, then you remember that cult it comes from the root word quell, which was Proto-Indo-European, and it means the hub of a wheel, essentially. It's Aryan. The Aryans invented the wheel. And so it means being in orbit around something. And so culture is in orbit around the domus, the house, and it's in orbit around our materialistic and consumerist culture, which cannot go on for much longer. I think that basically 2020 is the peak of it. So it's wonderful and it's kind of sad in a way. But it is insanity. It is a departure from normality, and no animal should be doing it because it's suicidal. It's clearly going to cost us a planet, and nobody signed up for that. But now there's a problem. If you want to get sane and liberated from this, it means we kind of, you know, caged chimps, and we've been brought up in domesticity. In essence, we're lab chimps, and we're brought up in cages, and we now, if you say, well, now that the lab is burning down and the kind of gulag is burning down, what do you do, and how do you get liberated? Well, first of all, you need to be liberated in your mind, right? The chances of you getting out of the cage now and back to the wild are low. So we can't go back to chimp territory. The options for that are diminished. People way overstate the possibility of dropping out. I think there's zero possibility of dropping out, and increasingly that'll be worse. So people in the midst of like cities where we're most really caged, they think in terms of, yeah, when the shit hits the fan, I'm going to go back to the land. It's like, no, you're not. If you look at Roger Hallam, he came from the land. He said you can't survive off the land anymore. So that's why he's started Extinction Rebellion. And I'll tell you, yeah, I mean, everybody, you talk to people that actually are fishermen and do actually realize that you're not going to arrive in some place and say, yeah, I'm going to harvest the seaweed. Like hell you are. There's rights to that seaweed. There's rights to the fish. They basically, the competition is most where you think the grass is growing and indigenous people are singing Kumbaya. Those people are under the most stress, and you just don't see it because you're in a city. So the chances of you leaving a city and heading out to the mountains and paradise are zero. So we have to think in terms of now being realistic. And the great thing about collapse and the kind of what I feel is kind of the flowering of civilization, the whole point, it's kind of like climbing a mountain peak. And although we might die on the top of Mount Everest, at least you want to savor what you can see from Mount Everest. It's a lunatic thing to do, but if you manage to reach the peak, and I think probably peaked in 2020, then it deserves you to ask and think what the hell this is all about, and to I feel that the least we owe ourselves is to get sane in the last bit of time we've got left in hospice, in our planetary hospice. And so how do you do that? Well, it all happens that it's a long tradition, and it goes back into the dawn of civilization way before the shamans did it. And so it's all established. You used to drop out and go and be a shaman, or and that's an ascetic, or a yogi, which is a faker, like Alan Watts talks about, the cunning man or the sly man way. And Gurdjieff also did that. Gurdjieff was a Turkish guy, or Armenian. He was an Armenian, and he ran a school eventually in France. And actually, the cult I was in is an offshoot of Gurdjieff's. And so Gurdjieff always said that that way of the sly man is not really open all that much to people. The other thing is the way of the Kshatriya. That's all these basically disciplines come really from the Hindus in the Far East. They the Aryan legacy. So the Kshatriyas are like the samurai, the Bushido code, and it's there are not many samurais left, and you can go to a samurai school and stuff, and you can do Zen and go to an ashram up in the mountains and do Rinzai school and some tough schools. You can still do it, but they started, I think, to realize that humanity's getting worse and worse, and the chances of people, the requirement for more and more people to get enlightened and just get damn sane was increasing. So I think eventually they came to the conclusion that it needs a fourth way, and that's the way of the householder. But a very, very difficult thing to do, because it's all about renunciation. In fact, you could say that everything about becoming sane and during collapse means letting go of everything. So you have to let go of things you never knew you were attached to, your things you like, not just your toaster and your microwave. You have to let go of science. You have to let go of libraries. You have to let go of television. And not only gadgets and goodies, you have to let go of ways of thinking. You have to let go of people and relationships and delusions that you've had and hopes that you've had for the future. Each one of those are kind of obstacles to liberation. And it's really an exercise in cutting those off one by one. When it's basically when you've got nothing left to lose, that's freedom. That's as it says in the song. And it's no kidding. It's not something you can really sell to people, because people are vested in ego, and it's really talking about what you get at the end of that is egolessness. So you can't advertise to somebody with an ego how great it'll be without an ego, because it just sounds like death. And it is death. It is death of your ego. So you can't say, hey, get enlightened, it'll be great, because that would be a lie. It's really something you just have to trust, or just the best thing is to just get fed up with life as it is. And so if you do that, then there's really, where you get to after that, you have to just trust that there is a better way of being. There's just a way of transcending your humanity and your insanity. And so it's just some people have a gut feel that there's something beyond this crap life we live in, that you can transcend it. Now, it always used to be individual, but what's going to happen now during collapse is that it's kind of like everybody's in the soup now. It's like everybody is going to have an epiphany of some sort, even if it's a deathbed epiphany. It's kind of like as the Titanic goes down, people turn into philosophers. There's not anybody left on the deck that isn't a philosopher. So it'll come en masse, I think. But now, what do you do? Getting a head start is well worth it in this game. So yeah, as a householder, you have a real problem, because the way of the householder was they realized that all the other three, the traditional paths, you normally did after you'd finished being a householder. So the ascetic thing was Hindus were supposed to do after you've done all your obligations, your kids are grown up, your wife is happily, there's a tribal sort of life, you're not abandoning your wife or anything. It was expected that older people would go into the forest and meditate and contemplate and become philosophers and sages, and some would come back and, educate others, and some wouldn't. They'd go off and perpetually be hermits and die in the forest. It very much like, animals, herd animals, they do that. An old, say, buck or something that's really a steer or something that's head of a herd would do that in its old age. It would get displaced and go out on its own in the wild and be a lone wolf in a way. But so now but that's no longer really an option for us. Now we have, with the way of the householder, you have to think, well, how do you do this while you have obligations? You've got to hold down a job. You have this very unrealistic relationship, this nuclear family, which is completely artificial. It causes so much trouble, and it's unnatural. It's against what we're designed to do. And so you have to live in this impossible relationships with the nuclear family, very, very unhealthy, toxic psychologically for everybody involved, but that's what society forces you into, the law forces you into. Then you have to spend a lot of time at work, and then you have to maintain a household and look after kids and maintain a relationship. It's an incredible task. But what you can do is, detach from it. So it is actually easier if you do that, if you're not so vested in it, and you kind of stand aloof from it. It actually gets easier, funnily enough, although it's a huge task to achieve. So what they've traditionally designed various tasks to do to get to that state of mind of detachment in a household, and they all really come down to a saying, which is, be in the world but not of it. So it means that whatever happens, you think of it like you acting in it. You're acting in a play, and this is your part to play in your own household. You are just playing a role, and it's not a job. It's a theater. It's more like you're doing an act as an actor, and on stage. And it's best to think of it like that. In the state of the frame of mind to enter into it is the best frame of mind is really, Nachiketas in the Upanishad, where it says, like, he's asking the traditional question, is what God opened ear and eye, and what's it all about, Alfie? Why do we live and die? Civilization might be ending now. What was it all for? Is there any meaning to it? Are we doing this for a sadistic God that just uses us for a sport? Are we supposed to fulfill some destiny? Is there no purpose in it all? Are we just slime molds? And the best thing is to approach life with that kind of question, and the idea that you can solve it. So great people like Newton and all these sages, they approached it, particularly Newton. There was a tradition, Leibniz even. They had an idea that life was a conundrum, a puzzle that you could solve. So it's basically like physicists see the cosmos, and they're saying, like, you can have a theory of everything. You can nail it exactly what's going on, and solve the mystery of life, the universe, and everything. And I think that is the right way to approach it. You have to have diligent, almost manic inquiry into what the meaning of it. What's the meaning of it all? Is there zero meaning? Is there something you must achieve? Is there an afterlife? All those deep questions. You should be obsessed with them and be convinced that even if nobody else solved them in history, you'll be the first person to crack it. And that's a good attitude to start out with. Now, in terms of basic techniques, that's an overall frame of mind. But in terms of daily techniques, the first question you need to ask is what am I? It's like, it's like, am I just my body? Am I a soul in my body? Am I just a brain? Am I just this alien cortex? It's like, if I do live on, what it precisely lives on? Do my hands wind up in heaven after death? Or, if my eye got poked out, would I have one eye in the afterlife? What age would I be if I didn't die? Or if I just did die, do all my molecules just get recycled? And, how did they all come together in the first place? And then the lights go out when I'm in a coffin and they all, worms eat me up, then there's nothing lost. Every single molecule, all our memories in neurons, they're done with calcium ions. Those calcium ions will still be there and they'll still be calcium. They just will be scattered. So you say, well, what made this life and these memories and the people I knew and all this come together? Asking those questions, then you say, a deep inquiry to saying, what is this I, this me thing that clearly seems to be the center of the world? Only, from absolutely radically truthful, all I really know is I'm a kind of a brain in a vat. I'm a kind of a, basically an avatar in a matrix. It could be a computer simulation for all I know. But I mean, what you really don't know if anybody else exists. You're just assuming because you kind of look like other people, but you haven't got a clue really whether other people looking out of their eyes see much what you do, if they see different colors, or if they even exist. They could just be automata, or they could be auto-generated by your own mind, like people in a dream. So you say, like, if it is all a dream and we are just or I am just a brain in a vat, is how the philosophers, Descartes talked about this, brain in a vat. Then, if that is the case, who is this person dreaming? Who is this dream? Who is this avatar in the Matrix? And looking in that query, the traditional way to go about this, a practical exercise, was called neti, which means, in Sanskrit, it means not this, not this. Now, not this comes from the idea that if you could see something, it can't be you. Like the idea is a very mystic kind of hermeneutic. It's an alchemical idea that the eye can't see itself. So Shakespeare, who was certainly in an esoteric school, said, he talked about our glassy essence. So if you go try look at yourself, if you try close your eyes and try and imagine who is it looking behind those eyes and stuff, it disappears in this kind of glassy essence. You're invisible. The eye can't see itself. So extending that logic, what they said was, well, that's a big clue. That's a big tool for you, because you can say anything you can see can't be you. So if I look at my hand, I can clearly perceive it. I can consider it. It's external, and so it's in my perception. So I can't be my hand. And now you can go through an inventory of everything you can think of, everything you can see, everything you can feel, and you say, well, I can't be my feelings because I can observe them. So everything you can observe cannot be the observer, is the logic. Therefore, you can do an inventory and go as an exercise and say, what do I observe? And you just carry on doing this exercise, over and over on a daily basis, every hour, every minute, every quiet time you get, while you lie awake at night in bed. Just do this exercise. You say, well, it becomes a kind of a game where you say, well, if I can see it, I can't be it. And it's tremendous psychotherapy, because you say, I always thought and identified with this feeling of inferiority or superiority, or I always thought I was, I always thought I was a doctor or some kind of professional. And you say, well, I can perceive that and I can see it, so that's not me. And so then you say nati nati. So you say not this, not this. Basically, it's saying if I can't be that thing because self-evidently it's external. If you carry on long enough, you'll go nuts. And that's the whole point. The point is to drive you to a psychotic breakdown, to drive you to a nervous breakdown. Now that, nobody normally tells you that because it's seriously unappealing in our society where there's so much impetus on being productive. And a lot of this, if you go to a psychotherapist, what they're really going to do is make you a productive member of society. Well, this is the exact opposite. You're going to break yourself and make yourself useless to society. But think it through. That is liberation. If you're in Auschwitz and you break yourself so you're useless to a plantation, if you break yourself as a slave and you're useless to the plantation, that is your liberation. That's how you get sent out to pasture. You don't. It's not really an aim to have a nervous breakdown, but if you do it assiduously enough and don't shy away from it, that's what will happen. What happens after that is a liberation. If you can get through that psychotic stage, then there's a wonderful stage. Basically from then on out, you break away from your old self and you kind of get a new self. Gurdjieff equated it to having a third brain. There are various ways of saying, well, you have a lower intellect, and most people are in this lower intellect, and then it's kind of like living in the basement all the time in a house, and you kind of climb the stairs, and from there on out, if you break through the ceiling, you live in the loft. You'll never go down to the basement again. It's a dungeon. So most people are living in this dungeon, and you kind of break out of the dungeon into the upper layers of your intellect, or the upper layers of the castle, and you live there for the rest of your life like a king. Whereas, and so it's a metaphor to describe, basically the feeling of breaking out. But it comes at a price, and it's not easy. Okay, now because I've said, it's a psychotic break. Is how do you have a psychotic break in the middle of, as a householder, with people relying on you and, partners and dependents and jobs and stuff. And it'd say, well, it ain't freaking easy, but it's not impossible. I just lay that out for you, and also lay out that it's going to happen anyway. You see, what people, the mistake people are making is thinking, well, I have to hold it together because I'm a responsible individual. Straight away there, that's the ego trying to preserve itself, and it's something you can observe. So if you said nati nati, you would say, well, I'm not a responsible individual because I can observe this individual being responsible. So obviously that's not me. That's just an image. It's a mask I'm wearing. But you see, people can't think in terms of, well, I have to hold it together because I'm a responsible person. And you say, well, you're going to lose it anyway. And that's hard for most people to take, but we're going to go through some very tough times, and you ain't going to, the nuclear family is an impossible thing anyway. So you're going to lose your partner, you're going to lose your kids, you're going to lose all your possessions. No one's going to come through collapse with all of those intact. So if you're really, really bold, if you're really ruthlessly honest with yourself, you say, well, fuck it, I'm going to lose them anyway. I might as well lose them in style and get sanity and enlightenment. You don't want to have it as a goal, but the truth is that if you ever were going to hold it together, it would be by going through a psychotic break and basically achieving enlightenment and liberation. So once you're not vested in the role and you've lost your ego, you have a lot better chance of fulfilling it well. So there is that, but of course it's self-defeating to say, I have a clever way of holding everything I've got together, I will become enlightened. And it's like, well, no, that's going in the wrong direction. You have to give all of that up. It's only by giving all that up that you can actually move on. So it's not a clever device for hanging on to everything you got. Although that's what these are the tricks your alien cortex will play with you in its kind of death throes. Ultimately, you're in a big war against your alien cortex, represented by your ego. And it's very, very tricky. It'll do every trick in the book to deflect you and to distract you and to basically cripple you. It's like having a good example is like having a butler in the house that's taken over the house. Especially, you're the king in a palace, and you have this Eminence Greece, or this usurper who's taken over. It's a tyrant who's taken over your kingdom and basically keeps you in a dungeon in your own castle, and then pretends to be the king. And that's really our alien cortex. And now, it happens in real life. It happened to, like, if you've seen The Last Emperor, it's all the eunuchs took over the kingdom, and they all had palaces, and they all faked the emperor out. So the emperor was just a tool for them. They kept him in luxury, but he was really a prisoner in the Forbidden City, and they ruled, and though they were commoners, they usurped the empire in China. And so, hello.
Sorry, I'm still on the road, and I just wanted to say hi to you because I won't be able to stay. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Sophie.
Hi.
Nice to see you. I'm glad you got in.
Yeah,
So,
we're still traveling, and I couldn't really connect. And we're in the middle of nowhere, on top of a very arid plateau, and there's a bit of 3G. So I tried to say hello to you, but I don't want to interrupt your conversation. And
well, you got
good to see
so
you anyway.
I was just getting to the end of this. So let me get to the end, and then you say. But what we're talking about was really about being the way of the householder and actually doing liberation while you're still in relationships and have a job and you have a normal Western liberal life. How do you, with all these obligations and responsibilities, what practically do you do to get liberated? You can't, it's not really feasible to break away now and just go to an ashram and navel gaze. You've got to basically do this, you've got to rebuild the ship while it's afloat. It's kind of exceptionally difficult. So, yeah, so the thing that I was saying is, where did I get to? It's kind of an effort of giving up was in renunciation. So I said about the 1918s, not this, not this. The other thing is to deliberately find things and give them up mentally. So you can't renounce your household and your partner and your kids. It's particularly difficult for women to give up their kids, but the mere fact that it's hard for you to give up, mentally give up on a relationship or give up on your kids or something, is a true act of love. It really is, the old corny poster that says, if you really love something, you would set it free. And then if it came back to you, it was yours forever. Well, that's a devious trick, because it's not supposed to be yours. You're supposed to let it free forever. But that poster sucks, because it's conditional. It's saying, well, you can have it forever. You just have to let it go, and then it comes back, and then it's your slave. And you say, well, if you love it, why would it ever be your slave? It's bullshit. But anyway, in principle, that is right. That if you mentally, you don't have to. This is the thing is, as a householder, you can depart and leave to the ashram in the mountains, not physically, but you can do it psychologically and mentally. And you don't need to tell anybody. In fact, you will find I don't like to say this, because you don't want people doing this as a motive to make their life better, but you will find that your life will get better. You see, women in particular, they say, I love my kids. I can't ever renounce and detach. Let me say, well, give it a fucking go, because I can tell you right now, you're clinging to them. You don't really love them. You're dependent on them. And as soon as they let go, they'll find their relationship improves a whole lot. Now, I'm not saying this is a self-help methodology. I'm saying this is, you might find that. Don't do it because of that. You do it because you want to basically cut off and renounce. It's basically radical renunciation. Basically, it's doing collapse early. You assume, well, in collapse you're going to lose everything, so lose it early. It's basically losing your life. You're losing your ego, is losing your life, not physically. It's very important. The rule is no physical harm, but it's psychological. So if you detach and renounce all of these things one by one in your head, and do it completely, as if you're dying, you say goodbye to each one of them. You will start to run out of things to detach from and give up. And that's when the real work starts, is you have to do inventories, find things that you are attached to. And eventually you'll find amazing things that you never knew that you were attached to. And when you give those up, you'll get one that you'll go like that. It'll be like, normally the last one or two strings are very hard to discover. You might take months or even years to figure out what it is. You know that there's something, and it's very hidden from you, because it's kind of like your last Horcrux. You're kind of smashing your own Horcruxes in Harry Potter, and basically your alien cortex will hide at least the last plum one. And if you manage to find what that is and just smash it with a hammer, bang, you'll be very amazed at the result. And then afterwards you're free, and then there are no rules. Now, I did mention, so they do say this is basically a progression. This was a standard metamorphosis. There's Ovid's metamorphosis. A lot of the Greek myths and that, they all coded messages for exactly this process. So it was always fringe. You could never, even in ancient Greece, it wasn't mainstream. You always had the mainstream culture, and this was the breakaway culture. So it's always underground. It's right underground in the Enlightenment. It's secret. It's often done in secret societies, and there's a sort of chain and this knowledge that has progressed underground, in underground schools and establishment. You'll see it surface. It's a big braid. It comes up in Albigensian philosophies. Everybody, the Templar Knights grab a piece of it. Once you understand what they're all doing, you suddenly realize, okay, there's what they teach you in school, and then there's this undercurrent underneath. And once you realize what those guys are about, then you can piece together stuff. And so then that's the next thing to do in as a householder, is to study. And to study all of these guys, once you start, basically it's keeping good company and really following in the footsteps of what these guys have done. You piece together exactly what they've done. So going back to the idea that life, the universe, and everything is a puzzle that can be solved. You can crack the mystery and then you would say, well, a lot of people have tried, some have failed, everybody got as far as they could in a lifetime. And you can look at particularly great people's lives and you can see what piece did they get. You know, they normally write it down. They say, like, people, if you're in the mainstream, then you think, well, people had insights or whatever. And, well, that's not the right way to look at it. Look at them building all the way to their key insight. And often that's as far as they go. They cash in their chips and say, I'm done. That's as much as I can achieve in a lifetime. And if you can find that, that's their kind of totem that they managed to get. And you just take that, and it's like getting points in a video game, and you move on to the next person and try and figure out, you know, what's the piece of the puzzle they managed to get. Now, a lot of the guys are subtle. They don't. A lot of the guys won't tell you. A lot of the guys, you know, Jung and stuff, he'll point, you know, but he kept it all very quiet, and Newton as well. Shakespeare, all of these guys did it in secret because a lot of reasons, but really, yeah, the mainstream it's heretical. The stuff is heretical, and it's against the program of the mainstream. So liberation is not tolerated by our culture, and so it has to be kind of done in secret. But like runaway slaves, you can pass information and, you know, secrets about how to get. Some people can come in and out of the camp. So you'll be amazed that some people have free access in and out of Auschwitz. They can come and go as they please. But all that stuff is secret. So yeah, so it's fascinating and interesting. But there's study, there's the exercise of 1980. There's the emergency thing, which I already given you, which is that exercise in grounding yourself, and then in meditation. So essentially, the reading is reflection. You don't come to any conclusions, and also be careful as you go through getting these insights and stuff. You should renounce them, because that was the next pillar I gave you, was renunciation. So the worst thing in the world is you have some breakthrough and you latch onto it. That's the worst thing in the world. So okay, let me talk about a few pitfalls on the way. Doing this exercise, your alien cortex, as I said, is devious as all hell, and I'll tell you a few of its tricks straight out. As soon as you start on this journey, you'll find that the very first thing is bliss. Bliss is a sod. Hope is a terrible. And what these things are makyo. They, in the Zen tradition, they generally call them the devil's cave, or makyo. It basically is traps on the way. So
sorry,
yeah?
I'm gonna have to go. The battery's nearly gone, and I think the signal is going. I'll listen to you later.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
Well, thanks for
I'll record
talking.
this.
Bye.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Yeah. So makyo is the normal phrase for this. It's is pitfalls on the way. Now, as soon as you start on a journey like this, especially with other people, you'll find that one of the first is bliss. People start on this, they learn the exercise, they start to things to do is to center yourself in the moment. Is you taste your food. When you walk, you feel your feet, the pressure of your feet on the floor. You start to live and get connected with your senses. As soon as you do that, you get a sense of bliss. Now, a lot of these guys, that's as far as they go. They become bliss junkies, and they go around California, going to these meditation centers and workshops, and they just after the bliss. And they share, they're like drug addicts. They share, come to this, see this guy's really good. And when they say, smoke this crack is what they're saying. But they go from guru to guru. They're skating superficially. And what they get trapped by is these guys who are often enlightened, but they're scoundrels, and they sell satwa. They sell you your own endorphins, and there's a huge market for it. So 98% of people that start on this journey fail at the first hurdle, and the first hurdle is, oh, I feel so at peace with the world, and I've got this sense of bliss, and I've got this teacher that basically sells me my own endorphins and makes me feel good, and they're stuck. make any more progress. That's it for the rest of their life. And the alien cortex is laughing its head off because they're such suckers. So as soon as you notice, then the next thing that happens is you make progress. You get some insights. You go, fuck, that's, yeah, it blows my, you must never sell out. You see, what happens as you go is your alien cortex will try and buy you off and say, okay, I get it. You're coming for me now. I'm in really serious shit. Okay, what I'll do is I'll buy you off. And it buys you off with things like everything known to man. It'll buy you off with money and success. You're suddenly saying, like, this is fabulous. I have a wonderful aura. People are coming up to me and saying, like, Mike, you're such an unusual guy. Tell me your secret. And I've got friends and people are respecting me now. It's like, oh no, it's a trap. It's Markio. Just no, head away, run away. So basically, and then people find that, well, once you stand aloof, particularly like women, for men, they love men that are aloof. So once you start detaching and becoming a man of mystery that's mentally renouncing the world and standing aloof, that's very attractive to women. And then the next thing is, so basically sex, and then maybe success at work is. Have you seen The Office, where the guy goes like, fuck it, I don't care anymore. So fish in his cubicle and stuff, and suddenly they start promoting him, and he's suddenly somebody. And you will find all of that as you start renouncing it. Because what the guy in The Office was doing was he just gave up and renounced this bitch of a company, which is this corporate environment, and just said, like, I'm detaching. That's exactly what you need to do. But the thing is, it's subtle. You don't want to get caught in the rewards of that. You must say, nati, not nati, and detach from it and carry on doing that. And the more, basically, you can sell out at any point, but I'm telling you now, you'll regret it. Just never sell out and anything, because the prize is liberation. The prize is yourself, and liberation really means reintegration with the universe. So that's the granddaddy of the price, but it's like Slumdog Millionaire or something. The guys will try and deflect you and buy you off and everything along the way. And so you have to be vigilant as all hell and be, ruthless. I mean, don't sell out. You can't sell out on the journey when things start getting better. And so, so that's quite a lot for you right there. So that's sort of canned course in one go. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's good. I think the last point you talked about, the selling out, that's I think that's the difficulty, especially for me in the civilization, because there's always a bargain. Civilization will bargain with you, whether it be a job, money, relationships. So it's always there. So yeah,
you see a lot of it's best to start this work when you really are in despair at the rock bottom, because you see a lot of people, it's like Extinction Rebellion. All these people started out because they had a bit of eco anxiety. They realized, oh my, maybe I'm mortal, maybe the world's turning to shit. But that little lump of eco anxiety didn't go very far. It was soon, people really, if you start from the premise of, you just want to feel better, you're not going to get very far, because you start feeling really down and you think, I want to feel better. Then you start doing this kind of work. You soon start feeling good. And then you say, well, the world's okay. I don't want enlightenment and shit. And you start reading stuff saying, real enlightenment is no enlightenment at all. And you say, and there's another trap. That's another Markio, is you get too intellectual. So you get these people that are very practiced and intellectual, and then they will fence with you, saying, like they'll quote to you some sage that says, there's no difference between real enlightenment or not, and then or they'll tell you, like Krishnamurti is saying, like, there's no such thing as enlightenment, and you say, like, Yeah, he's right, but you don't know enough to say that. You're borrowing words and mouthing shit that you don't understand. So where you're at now, there is a fucking thing called enlightenment. There's death and there's enlightenment. And at the moment, you're heading for fucking death. Okay, so don't talk about quote Krishnamurti. So that kind of thing is people can get where they're not making any progress and they're getting clever about it. And so that's dangerous. Basically, you can't help those people. They can get themselves into a very skilled and entrenched ego. It's more almost like a psychopath. They're kind of trained and skilled psychopaths that are kind of self-preserving. And there's no cure for that. It's basically an armed, intelligent, semi-awake ego. And that's a beast that nobody can handle. Well, it's certainly beyond my pay grade. I would never go for it. But that's another danger. But if you approach it with a pure heart, that shouldn't bother you.
Right.
But yeah. So yeah, Makyo is the danger. Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to say is just in terms of you never make an attachment on it, particularly if you reach self-realization. On day one, I must emphasize this a million times. On day one, if you ever become self-realized, abandon it and run. The biggest obstacle of all is basically, self is the goal. If you actually achieve the goal of self-realization, abandon it immediately and go on. What a lot of people do is then they start their own religion and they start teaching people and they're making a new ego. It's another form of makya. So to give you an idea of where you stand in terms of enlightenment is Ovid and the Neo-Pythagoreans, the Pythagoras himself, he ran a school. He was doing this kind of esoteric self-development. They got very elaborate about octave. I almost talked about this the last time about octave, but really they traced the self-development. They said it was a natural self-progression, and it finds close parallels with the chakras. There's 7 stages that they equate to like tones and semitones. Basically, the octave, it represents the stages of your personal metamorphosis. So, so much so that if somebody explains it to you, and maybe we should do that if anybody's interested. I imagine Gary would be interested. But the Primavera is from Marsilio Ficino's school and the De Medici's in Florentine Renaissance. Now, the Primavera is a coded message on this Platonic progression or this Pythagorean progression through the octave. You'll see there's 7 figures in it, and I'll explain it if anybody wants. But the reason I bring it up is to say that the reason why you don't want to sell out an enlightenment is it goes do, re, mi. Mi is ego. That's the last stage of ego. Then fa is enlightenment. Basically, the semitone between, there's a semitone between mi and fa. So it goes do, re, mi, and then fa. Across the semitones. That's like going through a mirror. That's like really dying. But that's only three notes up the semitone. You got another 4 and full realization at the top. So if you sold out after do, re, mi, fa, you haven't got very far. I mean, it's great, but why not go for the brass ring? So just in those terms, if you to put that in more concrete terms, there's a guy like Freud. You can see him if you follow his life. He starts off do, and it's it's kind of it's kind of emphatic. It's fairly certain of itself as a thing. Then Ray is kind of tremulous. It's uncertain, and then eventually it gets to me, which is really of ego, a successful, self-realized, famous man. Become a Nobel Prize laureate and die. And that's what most people in our society think. Do, re, mi, and if you can achieve me, and it's just ironic that it's me. It's pure ego. This is all about me. It's funny when you get into it. But a guy like Freud, he died at me. He was all about himself. He was all about Freud and his theories. And that's true of most intellectuals and people that our society looks up to. A guy like Jung, he got beyond that. And then just how far beyond you take some work to figure out. But he definitely got further than Freud. And so Jung is an enlightened man, is basically a self-realized man. And he gives you all the hints so you know. But that means that he got over those first three notes of the octave. And I just put that out there to just say, Enlightenment and what all these guys are going for, there's so many names for it, Satori, and New Age movements that are dedicated to enlightenment. They'll tell you, in 1,000 lives you can achieve enlightenment. It's like bollocks. You can do it in 2 years and full-time engaged.
Yeah, it seems like enlightenment is very personal, and so yeah, right. It's a personal, I guess, journey, and I think what I've noticed is it really depends on your mental state, because you can follow these steps, and then, like you said, it's not like the solution. Your life can get better, or it may not get better, because it's a psychotic breakdown. It seems like it can go either way. There's been people who've gone through a psychotic breakdown and been better for it, and those who've gone down a terrible, a tragic path. And it seems like, yeah, like you said, it's a war with the alien cortex. And it's like, yeah, you do have to play a little trick on it. It's like there has to be some sort of I see it as like the two things that seem to spark this kind of psychotic breakdown, as I've seen, is like a trauma, like a traumatic event in a person's life, or it could be drugs, but it can't be like purposeful. It was kind of taken by, like, it's like your alien cortex was taken by surprise through drugs or the traumatic event, and then that can, like, I see that as a way to get through the psychotic breakdown. The person can handle it on their own, because it's like they're forced to handle it. They have no way out, kind of thing. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So I've never known of a single person that had a negative effect from going through a psychotic break. So what I call a eupsychotic break. I mentioned in my video the eupsychotic break, or there is such a thing as a malpsychotic break. Now, there is a common or garden malpsychotic break, which will see you sectioned and put in a state hospital. That's not a full psychotic breakdown. Basically, it's a half. It's like being stillborn. So the danger is not going through and then getting a bad result. If you go through the whole way there, I've never heard of a bad result. What's terribly dangerous is you go halfway and back out. You are so screwed if you it's kind of like it's kind of like a bungee jump. If you've got to be committed to that bungee jump and jump. You will fuck yourself up terribly if you turn around or twist halfway or back out, or if you know what happens to somebody if they take they tell you, if you've ever had a bungee jump, they say, you just take a little bunny hop off if you've ever seen anybody get fucked up really badly on a bungee jump, it's the guy who start taking a step and then back out and try and turn around or try and get back on the platform or try and bottle out. You are fucked if you do that. So a very common syndrome is guys they start to basically start to get what amounts to progress, but when the whole world starts getting wobbly and everything starts falling apart, they panic. If they panic and run to like the psychiatric profession, then you're in big shit, because those guys have a conveyor belt for people that tried and failed here. And what they're going to do is try and basically you the only analogy that serves here is that you're a runaway slave that almost gets through the fence, then panics, and then runs back to the thing and said, like, I tried to escape, but like I backed out. And they'll be really pleased and invite you back with open arms. But what they're taking in is a runaway slave, and they're going to punish the fuck out of you, whether they know it or not. So psychiatrists and that, they're only there to get runaway slaves and put them back in harness in the slave plantation. So the fact that you are a failed runaway slave doesn't mean that they say, oh, well, we'll patch you up, and they'll patch you up all right. But you're marked after that, right? They're going to, you're a dangerous animal to the plantation if you a failed runaway. So, yeah, a lot of this is breaking trust with the plantation and the plantation owners and our masters. And if you suddenly go like, no, I can't do this. I this is all wrong. I really do trust them, and run to the arms. You'll regret it. But those are the failures. I've never seen a failure other than that.
Right. Yeah, it's good that you made that distinction, because I think, yes, all over media, they always show those, I guess, the people who are, as you define, the halfway psychotic breakdowns, the ones who something happened to them and then they fall into drugs or they get into addictions, and it seems like they never get their life, or they don't. It's like I'm not sure if they sold out to the drugs and the addictions of society, and then it doesn't seem like they get into a state of enlightenment. They just stay in a perpetual state of despair, doom, depression.
Yeah. So what will happen to you if you make a failed escape from the plantation? What psychiatrists and psychologists and that will do to you is that they will medicate you so that basically you are incapable of making another escape. So they basically, yeah, you might as well consider it something like chemical castration or something, but it's basically they subdue you with chemicals. So it's basically you're a rogue element, and they can't cure you, they can't change you, they can't stop you trying to escape. But what they do is they just put you so much toxic chemicals in you that you can't function anymore. So it's kind of a mixture between castration and lobotomy that they just do chemically. So yeah, I mean that's what you head for. If you make a failed attempt to escape and you screw it up and wind up in the hands of professionals, you're in deep shit. Yeah, because they will keep you. They will basically you'll be in 1984. 1984, where the guys are saying how many fingers am I holding up, is that's what you'll be required to do. You'll have to be required to say that no, this civilization is wonderful. I'm sorry I went out of this cult. I'll go get a job. I'll conform. I'll take my medicine. It's like 5 fingers. Okay, they're 5. Yeah, that's 5. You're like,
oh,
great.
It's funny you bring that up because I actually read 1984 for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and and this is after going through all your stuff, Hugh, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, 1984 is about making a failed escape. Yeah, it's terrible, terrible result. Yeah. So it's worth analyzing 1984 and see where Winston Smith screwed up. In terms of, so George Orwell, it's important to know that, well, in my estimation, it's George Orwell, he basically never got beyond do, re, mi. So he's the same as Freud. He's not actually an enlightened person. So part of what he's saying in it's a deep book, but in 1984, it's really how can I put this? It's really his alien cortex that doesn't. It's in its death throes, and the thing. I don't know how to say this nicely. It's complicated as all hell, but how can I say this? Winston Smith, George Orwell, when he's saying with Winston Smith, his defiance of Big Brother and George Orwell's horror of giving into the state and praising Big Brother is actually liberation. So what's happening there is his alien cortex is on the wrong side of the mirror, looking at liberation, and in horror writing this book saying, this is horrible fate. I came to the edge of the precipice, and what I saw over the precipice was I gave up my ego and I just merged with love of Big Brother. Now, it's fucked up beyond belief, because that love of Big Brother means losing your ego in the bigger universe. But he expressed in the bigger universe as big